The Foundations for Safety Leadership, or FSL, is a 2.5-hour training program that teaches construction foremen and other frontline leaders 5 leadership skills they can use to help them improve job site safety climate and safety outcomes. It can be taught as an elective in the OSHA 30-hour program or as a standalone course in a company or union. You can download all of the teaching materials, including a complete PowerPoint presentation, as well as instructor and student guides free of charge at CPWR's website shown here. There are also additional FSL-related resources available for download, like hard hat stickers, wallet cards, toolbox talks, a self-assessment and planning tool, and more. Since its rollout in 2017, some trainers have asked for a video showing an example of how the FSL might be taught. So we answered their request by videotaping an actual FSL session being co-taught by 2 experienced FSL trainers as a standalone course. Before watching the video, we strongly encourage you to download and carefully review the instructor guide and PowerPoint. Thank you for your interest in Foundations for Safety Leadership. We've heard from many folks that it has already made a big difference in both their professional and personal lives.
Today we're going to basically do the training, okay, as though you were students. I know a few of you have already been through this, actually even taught it. Is that true? Did you do it? Yes. So if you have notes that you want to share with folks afterwards, or comments in terms of your experience, that would be great. But we're just going to go through it so that you get the experience and the information from the class. And then if you have questions along the way, we can play it by ear. Either do it during the class while we're talking, or if it makes sense to wait, we'll leave that up to you. So I just want to give you a little background. These 2 slides actually aren't in the training, but it's kind of good for people to know where this came from. So in 2013, CPWR and NIOSH, we put on a conference, a workshop, a 1.5-day long workshop. We invited 70 stakeholders from the industry, government, academics, small and large business, safety and health. Carl Heinlein was there. In fact, he spoke to talk about what safety climate, safety culture means in the construction industry specifically. A lot had been written about these 2 terms in other high-risk industries like the nuclear industry, airlines, healthcare. Not as much had been written about in construction. Like, well, okay, let's bring the experts together. That is, people who are in the industry, not academics. We had a few of them, but they were the facilitators. Mainly in the small groups, it was actually construction folks who were participating. And said, what does it mean? So at the end of the 1.5 days, they had identified and agreed on these 8 leading indicators of safety climate. And Bob referred to those earlier in our safety climate assessment tool and workbook that he had used. So these were the 8 that were identified. Then, after some time went on and we got the safety climate information out there, we decided to write the proposal to target this 4th indicator. These aren't in rank order, although demonstrating management commitment is clearly number 1, because without that, you don't have any of the other ones. And so thank goodness, Demio clearly demonstrates all of these, and particularly number 1, as does Greenwood and Manafort Precision, who also use the safety climate assessment tool, thanks to Bob. So we're happy about that. So the information you're going to learn about today in the Foundations for Safety Leadership targeted this one, but it also, as you see, covers some of the other ones. Some of the skills that are included in the FSL cover the other ones as well. So here's the curriculum development team, a 17-member team that helped put the FSL together. And these are all, again, OSHA 30-hour trainers, safety and health professionals from small and large construction firms. We only had one academic. We have consultants from Click Safety and other folks to actually help keep this real and usable, because this wasn't going to be an academic exercise or just we're going to create a leadership training program. We wanted it to be used, and I'm happy to say it is being used, and I'm very excited about that. So that's how the FSL came to be. Now we're going to get into the actual FSL module. This is the first opening slide, and you can see we have introduction and scenarios that we're going to go through and some other foundational material. Okay, so let's get started. The goal of the FSL is to do this, is to introduce you to 5 critical safety leadership skills you can improve, that you can implement on the job site to improve safety climate and safety outcomes. So how many of you have heard the term safety climate, other than today? Great, great. A lot of people, the term safety culture, safety climate are used interchangeably. We define it a little bit differently, and I'm going to share that with you. We see safety culture as what organizationally companies do to create a larger safety culture, what they put in their documents, what they say about their safety programs, what they espouse. But the safety climate is where you all experience how those policies and procedures are experienced on the job site. So that's a distinction we make. By the end of today, 3 pretty straightforward outcomes. We're going to explain why safety leadership is important. Our curriculum development team told us, you don't just say, do it, do it, do it. People need to know why they're doing something or being asked to do something. Then we're going to talk about the 5 leadership skills, critical. And then we're going to discuss how to apply them on the job site by going through some scenarios. Again, created by people in the industry, people on the curriculum development team, subject matter experts, so that it was realistic and spoke to people who were going to be learning this. So we're going to just not go around the room, just speak up. Tell me about some things that you have seen, experienced, ineffective leaders who you've worked with. Maybe they were teachers or coaches, whatever. What are some of the behaviors or practices they use that you would then consider to be ineffective?
Talks down to employees.
I'm sorry?
Talks down to employees.
Talking down to employees? Condescending? Yes.
Screamers.
Screamers. Oh, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one yet. I like that. Yes, sir.
Doesn't lead by example.
Does not lead by example. This is a really good list. These are some words, terms that I haven't heard in other classes. So thank you for that. It's wonderful. And you can look at this and you can say, yeah, I've had coaches, I've had teachers, I've had other people in my life who have demonstrated these. And therefore, I didn't want to follow. I may have had to, but I didn't want to. It wasn't with joy. Okay, what about, I know you could just say the opposite of everything we just said, but anything else that comes to mind in terms of effective leaders? Jody?
Listen with empathy.
Listening with empathy. Yes, Rick.
They'll be the first, they'll accept ownership, or maybe like a bad call, or not necessarily understanding something,
Okay.
and then own up to that in front of the team.
Good one. We're going to see that exact scenario later. All right. So awesome list. Wonderful. It really gets you starting to think about the importance of having leadership skills, so we can, not always, but try to stay on the right side of that chart. to be an effective leader as often as possible, to learn from your mistakes. And when you're not acting as the way you would like to act, say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it differently the next time. So who are the safety leaders on the job site?
Everyone.
You guys are too darn smart. Because, of course, the last one is anyone and everybody. So let me tell you what kind of the driving fundamentals are of the FSL. So like you guys just said, safety leaders are at all levels of a company and on a job site. At the highest levels, and I don't even like the term higher and lower, but at one level, let's just say that, at one level, the people who are creating the policies, the procedures that the company expects. So basically creating the culture, right? What are the policies and procedures for the company and the programs? Another level, and this is everybody who's responsible to be a leader to reduce safety incidents on the job sites, to reduce adverse outcomes, okay? Everybody is a leader, like you guys said. The FSL is designed to focus where this red arrow is. And what the people at the workshop told us, and that's why improving supervisory leadership came up, is that it's the foreman, the lead worker, those were the terms they use, who are kind of the linchpin to make sure the safety programs, policies, and procedures are implemented as expected, using leadership skills, not yelling and screaming like McKinsey said, but making sure they're actually implemented on the job site. And that's where the FSL comes in, and to make that red arrow, to operationalize it in a way where it's everybody's participating, but the foreman, the lead worker has those skills to bring everybody along to make sure it happens in a positive way. So that's where the FSL kind of is focused, the stuff inside of it. So I asked you all about safety climate. So you remember I said culture, safety culture was at the organizational level, the culture that's created. But in terms of climate, we see this, and it's defined in the research literature also as the employees' perceptions, and that's workers, other people. It's the employees' perceptions of how well those safety policies, procedures, and practices are actually implemented on the job site. So that safety climate assessment tool Bob was talking about, that asks both workers and management to rate how well these things are actually being implemented on the job site across those 8 leading indicators you saw. And what's interesting is when you look at what management says and then what the employees say, right? And often they're not quite matching. And so the FSL and other types of interventions to help improve the safety climate bring those two things closer together. It takes work, it's continuous improvement. I think someone said over here, not an ineffective leader is someone who doesn't want to continuously improve. So that's what the safety climate work does. It's trying to identify interventions to do that continuous improvement, and that's what the FSL does.
Now, I use the FSL, and Linda as well, to learn from the attendees. It's an opportunity really to learn. So this is one part of the program where I'll ask you, what are the things that you see on a job site that show there's a positive safety climate? So when you're out on a job site, what are the things that you identify with that show that there's either a healthy safety climate, positive, or a unhealthy safety climate?
We can do that. You wanna?
Just quickly,
Yeah.
what are housekeeping?
PPE use.
PPE.
What's the focus as soon as I land?
Sorry?
What's the focus as soon as I wind up on a job site? Is it 15 minutes and the superintendent is screaming, where are these people? I called for them Friday, let's go, they should be on the job, to something that's maybe more mature than, hey, this is an on-site orientation and that's an hour and a half. They're spending the time up front. And I think to your point earlier, what we saw 20 years ago was a disconnect between what management was promising to a client and the foreman or the superintendent gets on the job site, and here's all this stuff, all these expectations that no one told them about. And whether it's fiscal, schedule, or whatever else, they have these significant emotional events over all kinds of things, where I think now we're better at communicating these up front, so that when people get there, at least they have a better idea of what's being expected of them, so they don't feel like they're short-footed when they get there.
So there's no Where's Waldo experience, right?
Yeah.
Right, so we have housekeeping, PP, and orientation. Anything else?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've seen that really I like is the communication back the other way now, where I have a lot of people that call me all the time now and ask questions, proactive communication, where they say, hey, we're in this situation, what's the right thing to do here? And that communication, I think, is a huge sign of the climate changing.
Would you characterize that as planning rather than a reactive? Like, hey, Eric, we had an incident, or it's Eric, we have this coming up.
Proactive communication, yeah, definitely.
Matt?
Again, back to what I said earlier, attitudes of subcontractors interacting with us safety professionals now,
Yeah.
to plan better.
Right.
And before it was
To the man
Just
back there's point, they scatter.
show up.
Yeah.
So I think that insight's really important to gain from the participants, because now I know, and sometimes these things are not tangible. Some things they're not. I think that they're measurable at a certain level, but now you know how important housekeeping is. You know how important the orientation is. We've also heard about signs, wayfinding. You know how important that is. But what you've just told me has been repeated time and time again. I have close to 1,800 contact hours with the program, both in training that we've done on our projects and then external with partners and in the community at large. And this is what we hear all the time. So now that you're informed, you now can go out there and actually set a plan to address those things that the workers identify with the most.
And also, too, we have to hold up the mirror to ourselves. I mean, as our perspective is they didn't scatter. We were ineffective at leading them because they do their own safety, and our job was the gotcha moment when something went wrong. It wasn't, did we bring the safety people from the subcontractor and ourselves as a controlling entity into the planning. We were still kind of, in case of emergency, break glass and have the safety people come sweep up the mess. And now we're more a part of the integral planning, from interaction with the client as a controlling entity on the job site, and then being more involved with our subcontractors. So we've matured as well.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, that's wonderful discussion, and great hearing, from people who are out there how things are changing, how it's different now. Very cool. So as I said before, the other thing the curriculum development team said was, it's not just do this, do this, do this, but why? Okay, one of the reasons why are the costs of injuries, and not everybody thinks about that. A craft worker may not really think about all the costs that are associated with an injury, or God forbid, a fatality or in particular. But the statistics show that over the course of their working career, a construction worker has a 78% chance of getting injured at work. And the total cost of these injuries to workers and the industry as a whole is over $11 billion annually. So thinking about the actual costs associated with injuries. So effective safety leadership, not surprisingly, plays a part in keeping these costs to a minimum, these adverse costs. So there are two types of costs, right? There are direct costs and indirect costs, the things that you can see and the things that you can't see. So we're going to do, so let's do a little brainstorming. What are some direct costs above the iceberg, above the water, that you can see from an adverse outcome or safety incident? Yes, sir. Treatment, medical treatment. Okay, that's lost time. Yeah, the company's EMR rate. That's the other thing that isn't totally, I mean, it's obvious to the company, but maybe not to the worker.
Lost productivity.
I say add to that quality of work for the product you're doing suffers.
Suffering, productivity suffers. Yep, that's really good. Good one. Any other direct costs?
Work
Yeah.
stoppage.
Okay, work has to stop. Takes time. All right, let's see what we came up with as the curriculum development team and ones that we've learned over time and added. Medical treatment was the first one. Lost wages, sick pay, damage to the product or equipment, so that relates to quality certainly. Higher EMRs, higher insurance premiums, very expensive stuff. So those are the things that come to mind immediately. What about indirect? Reputation. And then what happens as a result of that? And who suffers then? Everybody. Yeah.
Your irrecoverable costs.
Such as?
In the follow-up phase, there's people in the office that get involved with workman's compensation, any investigations that have to be done, those people are getting paid. Then at that point, the inefficiencies that come along with putting a new team member into that position where, you know, Bob got chewed up by this last week, and now, congratulations, you win. This is going to be your job now. So at that point, getting someone up onto the power curve takes longer because they have one eye over their shoulders going, well, if that hurt Bob, and Rick was the guy that got hurt on this before that, how long is it going to be before it's my turn in the barrel?
Interesting.
So trying to recover from the inefficiencies back into productivity, that takes time, and that's cost because there's trainers, there's supervisors, there's extra effort that you don't really see in the beginning phase. In the follow-up phase, that logistical tail gets to be huge.
It's very interesting. So it's, you know, people often say training new workers, but it's more than that. It's much more than that. And the whole aura around that particular job or incident creates fear, anxiety, potentially. Yeah. Emotional. Yeah. Exactly.
I would also say company reputation and employee morale.
Employee morale. That's, and that relates to getting back to where you were. Yeah, that's hard. Yes?
I'd say reactive efforts versus proactive. So you're spending all the time dealing with the incident that happened rather than working on stuff, getting in front of other things.
Yep, right. And that takes a while, depending. Yeah.
Well, to piggyback off of the morale, wouldn't it be lost productivity if the workers aren't exactly happy?
Absolutely. They're certainly not working at the top of their game. Yeah. So lost productivity. Yeah.
Your relationship with the workforce. After you've had one or two of these things, when you start to call for people from wherever you're getting them, it might be a little bit more difficult.
So-
based on, so that's maybe a collateral effect of reputation.
Interesting. So people could say, no, we don't want to come work for you, work for this company.
Or just not even respond at that point.
Yeah. Wow. Does it happen out of the union hall? Like if, could people say, no, I don't want to, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, well, then there's also collateral effects for them, because if an opportunity to work comes up and it's like, you know what, I don't want to work in a butcher shop. So they declined that and they dropped down to perhaps the bottom of the availability list.
So by not saying yes,
To not want
Wow.
to be part of that
Yeah.
climate.
Wow.
And that has an impact for them.
so that takes courage. Right. Wow. Never thought of that. That's pretty interesting. That's difficult. All right.
3 things, Linda. Just
Yeah.
on the EMR quickly. When you do training in-house, how many of you take the time to explain what the experience modification rating is to your workers? So what we have found is that the workers respond very positively to really understanding what this means to them. Right? Because this affects their employer's ability to bid work. So the incidents that occur on the job site directly affect the burden and so forth that the employer has to place on their bids. So I would encourage you to find ways to share that information. When we talk about reputation, I would also talk to your group, your attendees, about personal reputation. How many of you have had a supervisor or have worked alongside a supervisor that had a nickname that his or her crew wouldn't share with them, but to the side would say, "Hurry up, Frank," or "Do it over twice, Sally," right? So there may be reputations that employees, that supervisors face when they don't perform at the level to support a healthy crew environment, right? So whether it's safety, productivity, or quality. So it's important, I think, to introduce that. I believe it creates a self-reflective moment for the folks that are in your class. Right? They may not have that in themselves, but they may have identified with a supervisor at some point in their work career, or even in school, a coach, for example. And the ability to attract new workers. I can tell you with confidence that when you as a firm are pursuing improvement with safety, productivity, and quality, that you will attract, that you will definitely attract the highest level of craftsperson that is available to your industry. So I know this through having conversations with Randy next door. They report this, formative reported this to me, that people are actually seeking them out because of the way that they're running their company.
Yes. We've actually had people in some in-depth orientations that have come up to me very discreetly, like during a break or whatever, and it's like, you know, man, I appreciate what you're doing, but I can't work with all these rules. And can you help me out with talking to my boss? And one that was huge on that individual's part. Then also, too, speaking with his boss, his manager, had no idea that when he sent people to a job site like ours or Bob's or many other people in this room, and the client at that point in time was Pfizer, was just so out of touch with the requirements that really they pushed that employee kind of like out onto the long, skinny branches of risk, because they didn't understand the expectations on one end, and not every team member is going to fit every situation. They're almost cheating that person at that stage.
Wow. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think for me, hearing this stuff is really interesting and important. Construction is a complicated business. So many people, so much risk, and it's not a static setting. It's always changing. So, and weather and everything. So, thank you for sharing, everybody, for being honest and sharing what you experience. So let's see what some of the indirect costs are that the CDT came up with. Disability, shorter life expectancy, some tangible stuff. Family and coworker suffering. Lost productivity, hiring costs, and we heard even beyond that. You know, hiring costs is kind of the simple part, but it goes beyond that. I wouldn't say simple, but diminished company reputation and all the consequences that result from that, and death, right, with fatalities. So I always see that, and I get conflicted of why that's in an indirect, because it's a fairly direct activity, right? Someone dying, but all the costs that are associated with that, emotional costs, financial, everything that you don't think about until it happens. So telling folks why you want them to be safe, why practicing leadership skills, everybody should be doing that, is important. All relates back to these costs. And it's good to share that, as Bob was saying, the EMR information. Okay, so talked a lot. You've given a lot of ideas of effective, ineffective, and costs. So the benefits, just some ideas. We don't need to write them down. What are the benefits of effective safety leadership then on the job site?
Fewer incidents.
Fewer incidents.
Better teamwork.
Teamwork's a great one. Who said type?
Morale.
Morale, yep.
Superior position for business.
Great. So if everybody's acting as a leader, people see it, customers see that.
Well, also too, if my overhead costs are less, and we're going head to head on a project,
Yeah.
I can afford to turn around and tell the project manager, cut your bid by $250,000 because my premiums, my insurance, my costs are less in corporate overhead in a built-in artificial margin.
There you go. Yeah, that's pretty direct costs. Okay, you guys got it. Increase morale, increase teamwork. Who saw these slides before we got here? That's what I want to know. Positive safety climate, reduced hazards. You guys got it all. Safer work practices, obviously fewer incidents, better business reputation, more productive, better quality. And you guys got all of them. So this is what this initial part of the training does. Just to kind of segue here, when you're doing the training, this whole foundational material, it's not a huge part of the training, but it sets the scene for why doing the practices, which we're going to talk about next, are so important, the leadership practices. Okay. One thing, before we get to the leadership practices, we actually haven't defined what a safety leader is. We've talked about benefits, we've talked about costs of not being one, but what is, for those of you who have trained, what is a safety leader? How would you define a safety leader? Lots of ways to do it. We had to pick one, which I'll share with you, but Jody?
Walk the talk.
Walk the talk? Okay, good.
You have to do that every single day in everything that you do. So I don't walk the talk. An example I use in orientation is I cut my grass at home. I wear safety glasses, I wear gloves, I wear hair protection. To get the little laugh out of it, I go, 1, I do it for my own safety. Walk the talk. 2, I don't want none of you people driving by my house taking my picture. Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. Gets a little laugh out of it, but it also sets it, they're more comfortable.
They get that. That's good. Yes, sir.
I think it's someone who makes people believe in it, not just do it because they're supposed to or they're going to get in trouble, but someone makes people believe in doing it the right way.
Yeah, and that's a difference between the 90s, I think, also. It's like you just have to do this stuff because OSHA says you have to do it. And there is certainly still that exists. You know, we have to do this because if we don't, OSHA's going to fine us, which is obviously a cost. But it's moving beyond that to saying why we're doing it. It's not just because it's a compliance issue. It's because it's the right thing to do. Oh, do you remember what it is? The leadership definition?
The ability to show courage.
See, here's what it is. And it's important that you remembered that term because we see in our everyday life, walking down the street, seeing something happen in a restaurant, seeing whatever, it takes courage to speak up, right? I mean, it's easy to say, you know, and have a poster, if you see something, say something. To actually operationalize that and practice that takes courage. And so I always give credit to one of the curriculum development CDT members, Paul Colangelo from Click Safety. He was the one who added that term. And I always want to give him credit because it really brings to life the definition of a safety leader. And you'll notice in this definition, we don't say anything about making your employees or your crew member do the right thing. No, it's values working and communicating with the team members to identify and limit hazardous situations. It's not to make them do the right thing. You know, it's not focusing on the sharp end of the stick there. It's not blaming the worker for not doing the right thing. It's working together to identify and limit hazardous situations, even in the presence of other job pressures. So this fairly brief definition encapsulates what it's like working on a construction site and being a leader on a construction site, because that's what this is for. It may apply to other situations, healthcare, you know, a lot of other ones, but we were really keen on making this about construction for folks like you. Okay, and now we're going to move into the leadership skills.
Before we go to the leadership skills, I'm going to add the following. And I think you need to find this place as you're presenting to your firm or to your community about courage, because I think it's important for me anyway. It's important for me to give examples to the group. So it takes courage for an apprentice to ask a journey person for assistance. It takes courage for a crane operator who's out there on their own providing a service to a contractor. It takes courage for that operator to say, it's too windy. The wind is currently exceeding the operational capacity of the crane. It takes courage for a foreperson to say, I don't know the answer, and open themselves up from feedback from the crew. Right? I believe that when we do that, we're kind of giving the group a permission slip. Right? It gives them a permission slip to begin that conversation at the crew level, at the project level. I'd also add the following to that slide, courage. I make that a different font size because I think it's so important. I also add in the word integrity. What does the word integrity mean to you?
Always doing the right thing even when no one else is around.
Right. So when we're out there and we've got budget and schedule breathing down on us, it takes integrity and courage to make sure that we keep going in a safe, productive, quality-driven way. I'd also say that in some of the organizations that you're in, that word safety may turn people off. Unfortunately. What I would say is focus on productivity and quality, and safety will will be right there, right? So quality and safety, as you may have known through training or just observation experience, safety and quality are kind of built on the same foundations. Now, I'm not saying to dismiss safety. What I'm saying is organizationally, you may not be at a maturity level where that resonates. And Linda and I are going to show you an example of what we're talking about here. I think that the exercise will make it really apparent as to, wow, I get it now. I understand that connection, right?
So just take a couple minutes and just do the self-assessment.
The back of page 1, there's a self-assessment.
Yeah.
Again, I find that when I show my vulnerability, I share my experience with leadership and being appointed. I believe it creates I have found it to create a totally different relationship with the crew leaders. And I believe that amongst themselves, and I'm talking about contractors. So in the room we had 6 to 8 different contractors. Jody was there and myself. I believe it helps support a really great level of communication amongst the craft, different contractors, but also for myself, I relate to the individuals at a completely different level. And I think it really strengthens that that relationship. I believe it creates trust and respect. It's like depositing money in a bank. You know, over the course of the job, there's going to be observations that we have of someone not working to expectation, despite how much we support those expectations and explain those expectations. There are moments where people don't work to those expectations. Jody's had workers that said, Jody, I just can't work at this level anymore. I'm going to ask to be relocated to another assignment. In other words, they can't work to the level of rule that we have in some of the on the project that Jody was on. Someone actually came up and said, Jody, I'm going to ask to be removed. I don't want you to find me not meeting the expectation that the project has, so I'm going to ask to get removed. That was pretty courageous, right? So the 5 leadership skills: leading by example, engaging and empowering team members, actively listens and practices 3-way communication. I thought it was 2-way. I speak, then you speak. Where's this 3-way come in? And then we're going to develop team members through teaching, coaching, and feedback. Okay, and then finally, recognizing team members for a job well done. Now, you know OSHA. You may or may not know that OSHA has incorporated some information within the record-keeping standard relative to incentives. So what OSHA is trying to avoid is a recognition system or incentive system that causes injuries to be suppressed, right? So they just came out with a further direction on that a couple weeks ago. So I'd encourage you to look at that memorandum to get better understanding about what they mean. But recognition doesn't have to be anything more than, hey, you did a great job today, right? And we'll talk about recognition some more.